Hi, you're listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Two Broads Talking Politics. Two Broads Talking Politics, and their names are Kelly and Sophie.
Bye, y'all!
Bye.
Listening. He just repeated the words that came out of her mouth. Listening.
Hi, everyone. This is Kelly with Two Broads Talking Politics, and I'm on today with Kimberley Johnson, who is an author, an activist, and a fellow podcaster. Hi, Kimberley.
Hello, and thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining me today. So there is so much stuff we could be talking about at any given moment these days. But maybe let's situate the conversation by just sort of an introduction to you and who you are and how you got involved in activism and the women's movement.
Well, it's kind of a long story, so I'll be as brief as I can.
Okay.
You know, I used to be an actress a long time ago, another life. I was an actress. I was on Days of Our Lives, played a police officer for 7 years. It was a small role. It wasn't like I had a huge part or anything, but, you know, I did that. And then I was also in outside sales, and then the economy took a dump in 2008, and so I decided that I'd been living in Los Angeles. I decided because my mother was living in Northern California, I was going to go up there, be closer to her, and start a new life. And I think it was around 2004, I had an idea for a book interviewing people about how they lost their virginity. And the goal basically was just for virgins because, you know, even though I don't like the term virgin, but still, the idea people who had never had sex before have questions, and you usually don't get the straight answer. And so I thought, you know, it'd be cool to get people to just give the straight answer. So we did work on that. We wound up publishing it ourselves, and that was in 2010. It was like from 2004 to 2010, we collected the stories, we assembled the book, we put it together anyway, and it was an on and off thing. So by that time, I had lived in Northern California. It was around 2009, 2010, and we had published the Virgin Diaries, and I was kind of like, you know, in between. I was thinking I was going to get a sales job in Northern California, which kind of never happened because I got, you know, involved in being an author and being online. And so what got me involved into activism was Rush Limbaugh had attacked Sandra Fluke for being a slut 3 full days on his radio show. And so I was not really involved in politics. I'd been following it, but when I saw that he did this, I wrote like an open letter from a liberal slut on my blog to him that was just very sarcastic. It got picked up by Being Liberal, the Facebook page, and that just, you know, I was asked to write for Addicting Info at the time, and so I started writing about politics, which I never thought I would do in a million years. And then cut to, I was giving a speech about women's rights for We Are Woman on the lawn of the Capitol, and I met a woman who told me, her name is Kamala Lopez. She asked me if women are equal in America, and I thought they were, and she said, no, they're not. We don't have an Equal Rights Amendment. So I immediately became an activist because we need to have an Equal Rights Amendment enshrined in the Constitution, and we still don't. So that's kind of like the long and short of all of it. And since then, I've been writing about politics and focusing on women, and then I started my podcast, and here I am.
That's fantastic. And it sounds like the kind of stories that we hear so much that, you know, it's people's life experiences that sort of lead them to where they are. So we are right now, as we're speaking, at just about the 2-year anniversary of when the Me Too hashtag went really viral. Of course, not the very beginning of Me Too, but when it went viral. What is your sense of sort of the state of women right now in this country? I mean, it's so back and forth and all over the place. But you know, what are the things that you're really looking at? The issues you think we really should be focusing on, and what gains we've made really over these last 2 years?
Well, it's interesting. I kind of talked a little bit about this with the Feminist Next Door on my podcast, and I think that there's a couple ways to look at it. Like, obviously, there have been rollbacks on women's rights, especially regarding abortion. That's not just in the last 2 years, but, that's been starting since the Tea Party took office in 2010. But there's, they have not restored the Violence Against Women Act and the administration. And, obviously there is a growth of, not just racism and all of that, but misogyny. Mm-hmm. And so we're experiencing this like social phenomenon of growing misogyny and also, rollbacks on our rights. But on the other side of that coin, I think because all of that is happening, we saw the day after the inauguration in 2017, women rose up and marched around the world against what was happening, and then again in 2018. And so I think there's like this kind of combination of we are experiencing setbacks, but because of those setbacks, we're getting fiercer and stronger. And when you do look at 2018's midterm elections, more women went to Congress than ever. And I think that's kind of like, that's the reaction to the oppression and the misogyny that we're experiencing. And with Me Too, I find it to be so incredibly frustrating because, we have to deal with the people who are, Alyssa Milano posted, I think it was the 2-year anniversary on her podcast about, of Me Too, and a man had come and commented about all the poor men's lives who were ruined because of it. And it was like, name one. Yeah. Other than the women, women have come forward, like Christine Blasey Ford talking about Brett Kavanaugh, and he went on to the Supreme Court, and she's like still in hiding. Yeah. And like, you take a look at somebody, that woman whose name is escaping me, who just recently came out and said that Donald Trump sexually assaulted her. Mm-hmm. And, I guess her life hasn't been ruined, but where did she get with that? She was unable. He's not in jail. Nobody's really investigating him. She didn't press charges, and I guess there might have been some kind of statute of limitations. But still, it's like it's not like women are running around ruining men's lives. So I think that Me Too is good. I think that we have to fight through even the so-called liberal allies who are saying that we have to be careful and not go too far, and men are afraid to say anything to their female counterparts at work, and we have to just move through that. And I think that in the bigger picture, all of what we've experienced in all the negative stuff, I'm hoping, and it looks like we're turning that into our favor, and that we're going to be electing more women and getting more women into the judiciary so that we have a more diverse legislature and all of that.
What do you think all of this is going to mean for the 2020 election? It seems like we're still seeing so much misogyny in the way the presidential candidates are covered, but maybe is somewhat better than 2016, or at least different than 2016.
Well, there have been a couple of election experts who have basically predicted what they're calling a blue flood. I can never remember names, so you'll just have to excuse me. But Axios did a story earlier this year, talked about he might be Michael McDonald, might be his name, and he said that based on the 2018 election, he's predicting a blue flood. He's actually, I think he was up to 67% voter turnout, and that it's because people in 2018 primarily voted because of Trump, whether it was for or against. Mm-hmm. And obviously, he's extending that to 2020 and saying that that's not good for Trump. The one thing, and I hate to be Debbie Downer, but it's something that, we all have to be aware of, is like, I think if it's just left up to the voters alone, we will defeat Trump. But because we have not done anything to secure our elections, unless we do something like that, I fear that the interference, whether it's from Russia or, another foreign adversary, I fear what could come from that. I don't necessarily trust that we have the most secure elections, because we don't. But at the same time, that should never stop anybody from voting. We cannot ever get to the point where we're jaded and say, oh, well, we can't trust the outcome, so we're not going to vote, because that's going to absolutely mean we all lose. So, I think that, again, if we're just left up to the people, I think we're going to see Trump humiliated.
Let's hope.
I hope. I know. I'm very hopeful, and I'm not being a Pollyanna. I'm just looking at, the way things worked out in 2018. And, people often say, oh, we're not going to remember this, or, the impeachment's going on, and, well, if he gets impeached, people are going to forget. But people didn't forget in 2018. Mm-hmm. They did vote, they based their vote on him, and it may not be on one particular incident, just a collective of everything that he did in those the first 2017, 2018. So I think the same thing is going to happen, and he's only getting worse, obviously.
Yeah. What I've been thinking a lot about lately, sort of worrying a lot, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I've been worrying about 2022. Let's say we do beat Trump in 2020, especially let's say we, win the Senate, which is a more difficult thing to do, I think. But, I'm afraid then everyone just goes, phew, I can just get back to my life. Like it's all over. And then something like the 2010 election happens again. And, we're right back on this path. How do you think we keep people interested and activated once, hopefully, the Trump threat is gone?
Well, that's a good question, and that's something that I think about too. And Democrats are not very good at. They're good at, like, for instance, when Obama ran, he knew what he was doing, and he targeted young people, and he was able to get a lot of people excited, first of all, because he had charisma, second of all, because obviously had a great team who knew what they were doing, and then, when it came to the midterms, it seemed like the ball was dropped. So, and then you're right, because when people are comfortable, and I think if we do win, if we win back if we get the Senate, keep the House, and we get a Democratic president, there will be this huge sense of relief. But what I'm hoping for, and what I will try to do as somebody who writes and does podcasts, is, reminding people that this is something that could go away in 2 years with the House. We could lose the House because then it's just the pendulum swings in the opposite direction, and conservative voters are hugely engaged. It's really so difficult to tell because we don't know exactly what's going to happen to the Republican Party. For all we know, there could be a split. And, if there's a split, then that would definitely benefit Democrats for a long time. But because we don't know how this is all going to, unfold, I think the best we can hope for is everybody who's got a large platform, especially people who are trusted, we need to continue to remind voters that, there are elections every single year, and, we can't allow ourselves to get complicit and comfortable, because if we do, next time around, we could get a smart Trump. And that would just be the end. It's like, oh my God. All these people, Rudy Giuliani and Trump and all his people, he's only the best people, but they are not very bright. They just keep making mistakes. And so, next time around, we get somebody like Cheney, who is smart. Mm-hmm. And he knows, he's just as terrible, but he knows how to quietly undo everything where people are oblivious to it. And then when they finally figure it out, it's too late. Yeah. So we just have to find a way to avoid that.
So I wanted to ask you, too, you lived in Soviet Russia for a year.
Yeah.
How does that help inform what's going on right now here? And, are you seeing scary parallels?
Yeah, and I want to be clear, I'm no expert on Russia. I happened to live there in 1980-81 school year. I was 12 years old. I was in 7th grade. And I was there because my father was a cameraman for ABC News. So again, I'm not an expert, but that was Soviet Russia. And I was very fortunate to see that. And, oh, my God, the night of the election when he won, I think, aside, because the two things that frightened me on election night were North Korea, and I was so afraid, and I'm still worried about that, but I'm slightly less worried and definitely more upset and worried about Russia. But the thing is that I had an insight that no one else or most people in this country don't have. And living in Soviet Russia was like living in a prison. And, I was a foreigner, so I had privileges. I could go to special, grocery stores, and I lived in an apartment building that was nicer than most Russians got to live in. But it was still, a police state where there were militiamen on every corner. It was kind of like a phone booth, old school phone booth, and there would be militiamen staring at you. Even if you were a 12-year-old geeky little girl walking around, they would look at you as if you couldn't be trusted. So, and then, of course, the constant, just endless, there were billboards and Pravda, the propaganda newspaper, which is truth, Pravda means truth, just all over the city. And then there were on the sides of buildings, there would be painted women and men, with the message of worker, the sickle thing, that whole women in the bandana and the pride of work and all of that. But it was also oppressive and dull. And there was just this kind of feeling in the country of people who knew they couldn't say anything, because if they said anything against the government, they would disappear, they would go to jail. So the parallels that I see here, obviously, it's nothing like Soviet Russia, but I see the propaganda. It's endless, and I see it coming from the entire Republican Party, specifically Trump, and unfortunately, we have this huge part of the population that's been brainwashed by Fox News and toxic right-wing, talk radio, and so they buy into it. And so it's funny because in Russia there is this pride for work and for hard work and all of, Russians kind of like that whole, they're not depressed or anything, but they're not the most happy people, but they almost take pride in it. And so a lot of them are brainwashed because that's all they've ever known. And so the parallels are that I see a huge part of our American population completely oblivious to the truth, unwilling to look at the truth, and just drinking it all in because it serves their whatever purpose for, whether they're racist or angry or misogynist or whatever. And so I just think back to that night of the election, and I remember thinking, people don't understand what could happen to this country, and it wouldn't take very long. We'll never become Soviet Russia, but we could literally become current Russia, and which is just an oligarch state where, all of the people who have money run everything, and the rest just kind of have to eke out a life. And I think that could happen here within 10 years.
Yeah, I remember hoping at, when the election happened that I was overblowing it in my mind, right? That I was worried it was going to be the way it is. And I remember being hopefully, it's not really going to be like that. I'm just making too much of this. And of course, everything we were worried about was true. Yeah. And it's really even worse than I could have imagined.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so, I think, it's so scary because we have to be, I think as voters, especially if you want to describe yourself as a woke voter, right, where you're paying attention, you understand what's going on. I'm going to harken back to 2016 and the interference, was a cyber attack. And I was at the time a Bernie supporter, which I no longer support him, but at that time, I was very much a Bernie supporter because I supported his vision for America. When Hillary got the nomination, I was a very enthusiastic supporter of Hillary. And so, but now I look back at the way he behaved and then the way he's behaved since, I no longer support him. That being said, when I was, really all in, I was in these, Bernie Sanders Facebook groups. And initially, they started out very friendly and positive. And so there was a couple times where, you'd see an anti-Hillary post in some of these groups, and immediately the group members would say, no, we're not here to bash Hillary. We're here to, promote Bernie. And so let's say that's February, March, or whatever of 2016. Around April, I started to notice that those groups became just, they switched from being pro-Bernie to totally anti-Hillary. And it was disgusting and awful. And I didn't really realize what was going on. I didn't realize it was this, Russian disinformation campaign that was happening. And although they never convinced me to hate her, they absolutely got me to question her. And, some of these, there was for instance, on 9/11, when she passed out, there was all of a sudden, there was all this, all these art, and this was more, when she was the nominee, but there were all these questions about, does she have a body double? And they were posting pictures of somebody who looked like Hillary Clinton, but it probably wasn't Hillary Clinton. And so I'm not a stupid person, but this disinformation and this form of trying to brainwash you, it makes you question. It's like a gaslighting thing. And so I didn't realize what was happening, and to a degree, I fell for some of it. And so the reason I'm saying this is because right now we are dealing with a much more sophisticated version of a disinformation campaign. They know what succeeded before, and now, meaning Russians and foreign adversaries, and so now they're building on it and they're making it more successful. And so I think as voters, we have to really, really be careful when we see things and when we see people who we think are allies online. We assume they're allies because they post about, democratic issues or they pro-democratic things. We don't know who they are, and we can't be sure that, for all we know, they could be very sophisticated trolls who are Russians. And, I've read about this where, Russians have learned about American politics and pop culture, and they understand it, so then they pretend to be somebody they're not, and they're engaging, and then they start, posting things that make you doubt. And so we just have to be very, very cautious about what we believe, and I'm not saying we should be paranoid, but we can't just accept everything at face value online. And I still see people doing that, and it freaks me out because it's so crucial to just don't believe everything you read automatically. You know what I mean? Research, investigate, do your own research, and go farther than just the headline.
Well, and not just the, a sort of active disinformation that's false, completely false, but things that sort of plant a seed of doubt in your mind, right? Like these recent pieces about Elizabeth Warren and saying, right. Oh, was she really pushed out of being a teacher? It's so easy to paint women, especially as being liars somehow. I mean, clearly that happened with Hillary, and it's obvious that that's sort of the tactic that people are trying to use with Elizabeth Warren as well.
Well, yeah, and that's if she becomes the nominee, which could happen. Her polls are rising. Whoever's going to be the nominee, they're going to go after, no matter who it is. And then obviously, if it's a woman, if it's Elizabeth Warren, we're going to see the same thing happen. It's probably going to be worse. And it's just Hillary already had all the decades of right-wing smears and lies told about her that Russians could draw from, and the right could just continue to recycle. And they're gonna find what they're gonna find with Elizabeth. They're gonna make things up, and it's gonna be awful. And so it depends on the people of this country who understand that we have to, because it's not being broadcast. It's not like there's this center. It used to be we had the nightly news, and we still have nightly news, but people watch cable news now more than anything. So we don't have this one kind of person or one television show where we can go to and the right and the left can say, okay, this person is telling the truth. And then that person is saying, okay, we are under attack. Russia is attacking us. Other countries are attacking, whatever. We don't have that going into the mainstream. And if you watch MSNBC, you're probably aware. But if you're watching Fox News, you don't know. Yeah. And so, I mean, I'm sure nobody on your, none of your listeners or mine are watching Fox News. But still, it's just this, we don't have the same kind of, we don't have the fairness doctrine anymore where we have literally fair and balanced. And so we have to kind of decipher all of this ourselves, and it's not easy. I remember in 2016, after he was installed, because I don't like to say elected, I said, I gave that same kind of warning. Like, we have to not have these knee-jerk reactions to headlines, especially to blogs that are, unknown and don't have source links in them. And I remember people were getting so defensive with me and saying, I'm not going to live my life paranoid. And it's not about that. It's about being cautious and understanding that we are, and at that time, less people knew, or fewer people knew, but now we know. And so now that we know, and it's been, widely accepted with our intelligence communities and everything, we are under attack. So we have to be mindful of that, and we just have to not allow, because brainwashing isn't about dumb people falling for lies. Brainwashing, you can be intelligent, and brainwashing is manipulative, and it uses emotional triggers to push you in a direction. So, I had posted something about this on Twitter not so long ago about people. It doesn't mean you're stupid if you're brainwashed, because I think I was a little brainwashed when I was a Bernie supporter, because the Russians were anti-Hillary. And so, it's like I said, I never got to a point where I hated her. I just questioned her more than I would have if it hadn't been for all of that misinformation that I was seeing all the time, every day. I was probably in like 4 or 5 Bernie groups, and it was just constant. I don't know if have you ever heard of H.A. Goodman?
Mm-mm.
Well, he was a guy that was like this very pro-Bernie guy. He was writing for Salon, for Huffington Post, and he kept writing things that Hillary was going to be indicted, and every day Hillary was going to be indicted. And literally he'd be like, tomorrow she's going to be indicted. And of course it never happened.
Yeah.
So after the election, H.A. Goodman, I think he was thrown off Twitter, but now he goes under the name of H.A. Goodman, like 2020 Trump. So he was supposedly this Bernie guy.
Yeah.
And then he's for Trump. And so he developed this huge following, and people believed him, and they thought that he was, they thought, oh, she's going to be indicted, she's terrible, and it never happened, and now he's a Trump supporter. So it's like, don't believe everything you see,
Yeah, no, totally. Do you think that explains some of, you posted recently about 3 women you knew who had voted for Trump that you then cut out of your life. Do you think that some of this disinformation stuff helps explain part of why they voted for Trump? And it seems like probably from what you wrote that it's not necessarily the same motivation for all 3 of them. But how do we explain women, especially anyone, but women especially who are voting for Trump?
Yeah, that's just a mind-blowing thing. I don't know. I'm sure the disinformation was part of it in their cases, but I think, one of those girlfriends that I had was from the South. She was from South Carolina. And, I wasn't active friends with her in that, we hadn't actually seen each other, I think, since, I think maybe 2001 or 2002. And then all the women that I mentioned in that article, I hadn't been active friends with for some time. We were only Facebook friends. But, each of them has their different story. And one is that she's from the Deep South, and she had, I was living in Los Angeles when I knew all of them. And, one of them was from the South. One of them was from a conservative part of the South Bay, which is called Torrance, California. And then another one was from a wealthy New England family, and she had moved back to New England. And I hate to say this, but she was just the kind of woman who wanted to marry a wealthy man. And so she wound up marrying a wealthy man who was a conservative, and then divorcing him. And now she's with, because I can see on Facebook, she's with this guy who's a full-on Trump supporter. He's an older, wealthy man, and he's like reads Breitbart, and so she's just going along with, I had said in my piece that if she had met a wealthy liberal man who hated Trump, she would hate Trump. So she's just going where the money is. And then my girlfriend who, I was friends with, who was from the South, she's back in the South, and all of her friends are Trump supporters. So her friends and family are. So that's just, she's going to have to go with them in order to, stay in everybody's good graces, whatever she thinks. And then the other one, I asked her, did you vote for Trump? And she said, yeah, but, Hillary was going to win anyway. And when I said to her, but, he grabbed this woman has 2 daughters. And I said, he was bragging about grabbing women by the genitals. And he's been accused of so many women, of rape by so many women. And she really didn't have anything to say about it. And it's like, well, I don't even want to know you anymore. And, I don't know if she just watches Fox News. I don't know. I think the best way to describe women, and it's, there's each woman has their own story, but it's patriarchy. It's this whole patriarchal mindset that we're not even always aware that is out there. As a feminist, and this is kind of branching off. I know I'm being so talky, but I guess this is a podcast, so this is where I was talking to my boyfriend last night, and I was just saying that, as a feminist blogger, podcaster, I've always been a feminist, but I didn't think about it and I didn't talk about it until I became a blogger. I have noticed in the last 6 years, really, 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 it's dawning on me every day more and more how much patriarchy has affected my life. And, I suffer through, I have body hatred, I have body image issues. I used to be, as you know, an actress, and I'm tall, and I have big bones, and I've never been the Hollywood ideal. And so even as a young girl, I started off with this, I'm bigger than everybody, and I battle with this body hatred. And, I was talking about this to him last night, and I said, it's patriarchal narratives. Mm-hmm. Because I don't fall into this I don't know, picture of what a woman is supposed to look like. And her value is whether or not she can have children, and if she can have children, she has more value. I actually had a man tell me that once. He told me that women over 40 lose their value because, they don't, they either can't have children, or it's probably safer to not have children at that point. And so we buy into this. We buy into it. I bought into it, and I still buy into it in that I still suffer body hatred. I feel like I'm too big or I'm too fat or whatever it is. And so I think that, that same kind of idea can be applied when it comes to somebody like Donald Trump or, the Republican Party and how they treat women. It's almost like we believe that that's just how it is. It's almost like the boys will be boys mentality. Yeah. And we just have to accept that this is how it is. And I don't know, outside of that, I don't know how a woman could ever vote for him. There's a quote, from, I can't remember what year it was, maybe 1999, but he says in a New Yorker article, women, you got to treat them like shit. And it's like, okay. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. It's terrifying that women think it's okay to vote for him.
Yeah. No, really, that anyone thinks it's okay, but yeah. Especially women, it's just unthinkable to me.
Yeah, it is unthinkable. But here we are.
Yes, indeed. All right. So if people want to find more of you, how can they find your podcasting and writing?
Well, you can find everything on my Twitter page, which is @authorKimberley, and that's KIMBERLEY. There's an extra E in my name because my mom had to be confusing. And you can find there, my Start Me Up podcast is linked. It's my iTunes link, and then I have my writing page, so it's pretty much all there.
All right. Excellent. We'll put a link to that on our webpage so people can find you there as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, so thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today. It's this whole country, it's just so mind-blowing right now, and so much to unpack there. But at the very least, I think a lot more of us are aware and awake now, and hopefully we'll keep thinking about what's going on and keep working toward making everything a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And as we get closer to hopefully electing a woman, I'm sure we'll be talk some more. Yes. No, seriously, I have told people this before, but when I was in elementary school many years ago, I wrote in my 5th grade autobiography that I was going to be the first woman president.
Wow,
and,
that's so cool.
It's very sad to me that I'm now old enough to be president. Way older than you need to be president, and there's still not a woman president.
Yes. Well, here's hoping that we change that.
All right, indeed. Okay, well, thank you, Kimberly.
All right, thank you, and take care.
You too.
Thank you for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics, part of the Dimcast Podcast Network. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast. You can contact us at twobroadstalkingpolitics@gmail.com or on Twitter or Facebook at Two Broads Talk. You can find all of our episodes at twobroadstalkingpolitics.com or anywhere podcasts are found.